I had a request come in just to talk about different ideas with verbs. This is a different kind of video. I probably won't be doing as much of like theory or endings or stuff like that, but just kind of trying to give an overview of different words, really different terminology that people use when they talk about Latin verbs in particular. So I'm sure I'll follow this up with a Latin nouns and adjectives one as well. So one of the things before I start, one of the things that always cracks me up is, and I say this to my students sarcastically, I always say, like, you're not doing grammar unless you're using words with syllables of like 3 or more. So things like indicative, imperative, subjunctive, impersonal, personal, all these terminology, even think of your cases, right? Nominative, accusative, vocative, all these things, that can be really confusing to students. So I'm going to go through some of that terminology that people use. And I would just say, first of all, like as a student, don't be discouraged by the fact that like you're struggling with a lot of this. I remember in college when I got given a packet of verbs. I actually still have it right here because I use it for references. And these are just cases, but I remember getting given this packet. And it's old, like, typewriter style, you can even see. But anyway, so I got given this packet. It's in Hebrew, but anyway, I was given this packet on all these ideas of, verbs and nouns and all this, and I just got really, like, discouraged because I didn't know any of it. I didn't feel prepared for it. But anyway, so don't be discouraged about it and just start to increase your vocabulary so that you can talk about these things intelligently. So I'm going to start, where should I start? Okay, I'll start with one of the basic ideas with verbs in Latin, this applies in Greek as well, is the idea of principal parts. If you're an English speaker, we have these in English, but we don't use them in the same way. But if you look up a verb in an English dictionary, like look up swim, you'll see the principal parts listed. Principal parts, what that is it just means these are the building blocks. These are the principal pieces. Think of Legos or something. These are the principal pieces that you build off of. So for principal parts, most Latin verbs, I'm not going to get into passives and stuff like that. Maybe I will actually, but anyway, most Latin verbs have 4 principal parts. Okay, so we'll take good old amo, amare, amawi, amatum. So when we say principal parts, what we mean is these 4 forms, sometimes 3, but the 4 forms that are listed in a dictionary for a verb. So first conjugation, first pattern verbs that have this are, the long A in the infinitive, we'll get into that in a second, but that have this long A, they will follow this pattern if they're regular. So amo, amare, amawi, amatum. Laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. Anyway, they'll follow this standard pattern. So when we say principal parts, what we mean is, okay, what are the building blocks that I'm going to build my tenses off of? So, for example, we have tenses. I'll come to that term in a second. We have tenses like the present tense. And I'm going to just talk in the indicative, which I'll get to later. The imperfect. In the future. The present, the imperfect, and the future tenses all build off of these first 2 principal parts. Okay, so this is where they are getting their first building block. So, for example, the present is going to go amo, there's that first part, and then I say, oh, my infinitive tells me it's a first conjugation, amo, amas, amant, amamos, amatis, amant. My imperfect, oh, I can see it's a first conjugation verb. That means it's going to go amabo, amabas, amabat, amabamos, amabatis, amabant. The future, I'm going to go amabo, amabis, amabit, amabamos, amabitis, amabunt. Pardon. So this is what principal parts tell us. Okay, present, imperfect, and future all build off these first 2 principal parts. The perfect system, active and passive, are going to build off these other principal parts. So the perfect tense, the pluperfect tense, and the future perfect tense are all going to build off of these last 2 principal parts, okay? And if you want to see the how of that, you can go to my video on the different systems of verbs, okay? But this is how this building works on principal parts. Okay, I put up a lot of tenses on the board, so I'm going to actually go to that next. When we say tense in Latin, we're actually talking about two things. A tense has what is called aspect, which means how an action is done, or in what way an action is done, and it has time. When is an action done? So, for example, in Latin, the verb amo, we could translate as I love or I am loving. So the time would be the present for both of those, but the present in Latin has either a what's called punctiliar, a simple action, or it has a progressive action, I am loving. So either of those would work. So one is time in a tense and the other is aspect in a tense. Compare that to, let's say, the pluperfect. Its time is way, way in the past. Its aspect is completed. So, for example, he had brushed his teeth and then drank his orange juice. Completed action, he had drank when, way in the past. So tenses have these two ideas to them. Aspect, what kind of action is being done, and tense, when is that action being done? So, and I think, again, in my verbs videos, I go into the different aspects of the verbs. Okay, so let me pause there for us. Okay, so we've seen the principal parts and how they build, and this idea of tense being made up of aspect, how a verb does what it does. So, for example, repeating it like the imperfect, or simple, like the present can be I see, versus I am seeing, continuing or progressive, or completed, like the pluperfect or even the perfect. So that would be aspect versus time when it happens. So those are the things people talk about. Another thing, another category of verbs that confuse a lot of people is the mood of a verb. The mood of a verb is kind of this idea that underlies, it's in the speaker's mind. Whoever's communicating it, whether it's an author or the speaker or something like that, it's communicating the force of their verb. The trueness or falseness or maybiness or something like this. So I want to go through the four moods here of verbs. So the first that's really easy for us in English is the imperative. Imperative comes from Latin impero, meaning I give an order, or I command. So the imperative is we give commands. We do this all the time, right? Sit down, be quiet, eat your food. I'm a parent, so these are the things that I'm saying all the time, right? So giving orders, that's pretty easy. The indicative, I always think it indicates reality. In the mind of the speaker, it indicates reality. So, for example, something as simple as you are sitting, or I am teaching, hopefully. Or even questions like, are you happy? That's in the indicative. It shows, it talks about what is real. And we really can only understand that, or it's better understood when we compare that to either the imperative, right, do something, that's a command, or the subjunctive, which communicates, I don't know. Now, side note, in Latin, subjunctive does a lot of other things. It communicates results and purposes and other things like that. But at its base root cause is it's something that's either unknown, like, but not in a question sense, like who is that guy? But the subjunctive of like, can I do it? And we could say posso mid facere, like can I do it? That would be in the indicative. But in the Latin, it's more of in the speaker's mind, like, maybe we can do this. It's this idea of like you're unsure. That's what's at the root cause, or it's conditional on something else. So one of the uses of the subjunctive is something like he marched against the foe in order to take them unaware, or he did a dawn march in order to take them unaware. So it's not controlled in and of itself. Okay, sorry, students in the hallway. So it's unknown because of something else has to happen or has to take place or might take place. So it's conditional on something. So those are kind of the two big ideas with the subjunctive. One is you're not sure about it versus the indicative, this is real. Versus the imperative, do this. You're not sure about it or it's conditional on something else happening. Pardon me. The last one is the infinitive, which is a verbal a verbal noun. So, of course, a couple famous ones from Shakespeare: to be or not to be. You could replace that with like exist or not exist, they're nouns, but they're verbs as well. So they're verbal nouns. So they function even like direct objects. So, for example, one common construction is in Latin, or common verb at least, is the verb cupio. I desire, I want. So, for example, I want to do something. Cupio, aliquem. I want to do something. So if you look at this sentence, you actually have two direct objects. What do you want? I want to do. What do you want to do? I want to do something. So even in a simple sentence like this, you can see how an infinitive is both a verb, it has a direct object, something, someone. That's probably not a good sentence. Anyway, but it's also the direct object of another verb, cupio. Okay, so those would be your four moods: imperative, command, indicative, reality, subjunctive, not reality, unknown reality, something like this, and then infinitive, a verbal adjective. Okay, the last category that I'm going to get into today, or the last idea, is a personal verb versus an impersonal verb. So, this one's actually kind of simple, but it's kind of complex at the same time. So, for example, in English, we most of the verbs that we use are personal verbs. It's the same thing in Latin. I see. Video. Right? Video, I see. If I want to, I can add an explicit subject. I see ego video. Okay, but that's different. Even think about in English. We say something like, it rains. Or it is raining. Well, what is raining? The sky is raining? Scientifically, that's not true. The sky is not raining, right? Clouds, I think, are raining, actually. They're dropping rain or something like this. So in an impersonal verb, same thing in Latin, in an impersonal verb, there's no subject. There's no explicit subject. So pluit, it rains. We kind of do that in English. But they do it with other verbs too. So, oh my goodness, apportet. Apportet means it is fitting or it is proper. So, for example, I could say, apportet mihi ludere. It is fitting for me to play. Or it is appropriate for me to play. But often when we translate an impersonal verb, we would make whatever in that case is in the dative, we would make it our subject. Like, I want to play. Or I need to play, or something like this. So that would be a personal verb. We have a subject. Versus an impersonal verb in Latin where we really don't have a subject, but you don't need it. Sometimes, though, they'll fake a subject with like a dative. Okay, so you can look that up. Apportet, pluit, niwet, anyway, things like that. It's snowing. So you can look those up. I hope that helps, and good luck with your Latin study.